Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Wonder Park. This is a strange, different, kind of original property type of movie. I have to sort of give Nickelodeon Movies and Paramount Animation credit for making a movie like this, because you don't see a lot of major animation studios drop this much coin on a film that is not based on a licensed property or anything like that. However, there's a lot of complications behind the scenes with this film, not just that this is one of the few and maybe only film to ever be released without a credited director who was fired for inappropriate behavior and sexual misconduct, multiple complaints of inappropriate and unwanted behavior, but also because this is actually a sort of pilot or backdoor pilot thing that Nickelodeon sometimes does with their movies that leads into their TV shows. They haven't done this in a while, but they did it previously with Jimmy Neutron and Barnyard. There's going to be a TV show of Wonder Park later this year. It's kind of different from being just like, hey, this studio believed in this weird little movie because of that, and also the uncredited director thing who was fired close to the end of production. It was kind of all done. Now, it's hard to see this film without those things kind of on your mind. One of the biggest problems with Wonder Park, I almost kind of wish I could have seen this without knowing all those things, because my initial feeling on this film, really, it's kind of a weirder kids film that when you were a kid or when you're a teen, you'll be like, hey, did you ever see like Wonder Park? Like, that was sort of a strange little interesting movie. You know, it's not the best, it's not my favorite, but like it's like some animals in an amusement park that was being swallowed up by a giant death cloud and stuff, or sadness death cloud, or just sadness cloud, whatever. And in that way, yeah, it's like I've never really seen an animated film like Wonder Park before. Now, the designs are not really that interesting. The story is kind of part inside out, part doesn't make sense, part about a kid who has a huge imagination and not giving up on yourself. And there's like a lot of themes in this that are kind of like, okay. But it's sort of more of, you know, the secret of art that I talk about all the time, which is art isn't what it is about, it's how it is about it. Famous quote by Roger Ebert. And I'd say how this film is about it is strange and weird and, again, doesn't make sense, but you kind of, once you're along for the ride, it's an amusement park movie. I kind of enjoyed the way it was about itself. I almost was like, I would see another movie directed by whatever made this, just because I sort of like the unorganizedness of the whole thing in a degree. This is about a little girl called June who loves amusement parks almost as much as Defunctland. So June and her mom make up this pretend amusement park because she loves amusement parks, apparently. They don't really get into that, more of that she just likes making this one, but I'm assuming she's been to one. So her and her mom make this thing up, and her mom will whisper things into her ear because she's like, has imagination, but sort of actually doesn't. Like, her mom is kind of like the Jack Kirby. She's Stanley. That was shitty, but that's kind of how it goes. So then, you know, she makes these things, and she even makes a huge roller coaster out of like things around the neighborhood and plays around with that. And she loves doing things with her mom. We find out her mom is sick with a thing. I don't know, a thing that moms get sick with. She starts to not want to do the amusement park stuff because her mom has to go away to go to special doctors somewhere. And her dad's sort of like sad, but also when she's gone, sort of chill. And then she's going to go to a math camp, which seems really unearned and doesn't make a lot of sense. It feels like her friend who's more into math maybe was going anyway or something. And then she goes to that and decides to leave the bus and kind of run off. And then she finds Wonder Park in the forest because she wants to go save her dad in a sequence that's truly terrifying about how her dad will just, I thought it was soda, but everyone else seems to think it was beer, drink himself to death, eat pizza, and then burn down the house when the house will explode. So she has to get back to save him, and on her quest to go back to save her dad and not go on math camp, she finds Wonder Park, or Wonderland, sorry, Wonderland. By the way, the theme park is called Wonderland. This movie is called Wonder Park. I don't know why, but sure. I keep thinking that's a mistake and that I have it wrong, but whatever. She goes and finds it, and it's like all in disarray, and there's a death cloud eating up everything and the animals that she made up, except for Peanut, who draws things. This is so complicated. Now that I'm saying it, like, holy shit. Like, oh my god, I did not realize how convoluted this movie was. I was watching it, I was like, it's just a normal movie. Now I'm like, wow. But anyway, she finds that she's trying to save the park from these chimpanzee zombies because they are versions of Peanut, who in the imagination had a pen. Yeah, oh my god. Had a pen who would draw various rides if people came up to him right at the amusement park. And in this amusement park, people don't really care about testing and making sure things are safe before they go on them. So they're just like, hey, this monkey made stuff with a pen. I'll have my child go on this. And so they have to find Peanut and like save the park from being swallowed up by this death cloud of sadness and stuff. Ultimately, I think this film does kind of want to do this thing like My Neighbor Totoro or Inside Out or countless other films or A Monster Calls. It's not as good as any of those. Narrative-wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the whole idea of how this park works versus her mom, what her mom's sick with, like what's going on, like this guy Peanut. Everyone thinks he's creative, but he's really a sham, even though he sort of knows it, but they never call him on it. That there's all these other animals there, what this is associated with, how are there people at the park, that just seems to magically happen. There's just so many like weird things about this movie that it like very much works in a kid's sensibility, because when you think more about the logistics of it, it like very much falls apart. This is not a movie that, like, story-wise, it honestly several times feels like things were cut out and it was cut down. And I'm not sure because the director, Dylan Brown, who is so here's the thing about Dylan Brown, who is uncredited and literally you don't even see his name in the credits. Like, there's just no director credit. They just like, it would have been funny if they said directed by and it was blank, which is what I would have done, but they didn't do that. So, because that would have been funny. But he was a directing animator on Toy Story 2. He was an animator on everything from Presto to Ratatouille to The Incredibles. Finding Nemo, he was a supervising animator. I'm fairly certain this is the same Dylan Brown. There's like no one even links to any page about info about this guy before he got fired for this job, and there's only 3 Dylan Browns when I typed in Dylan Brown Pixar into Google, and the other 2 are actors, and one of which is a woman. Maybe this director's a woman, but I don't think it's that one because she has I think no animation credit. Not because they just assume that Dylan Brown has to be a man. This movie's sort of a mess, and that's even true visually. Now, visually, in some places, it can do sort of like even Malick-esque kind of shots and things, and kind of interesting cinematography, but I would say this is more of an interesting use of camera in an animated film than I've seen in a while. But unlike How to Train Your Dragon 3, which is very precise and beautiful and the cinematography is gorgeous, there's a real art to it. This is just like cutting around like crazy, moving the camera on shots sometimes just to show off that you can do that shot, not that you have a need for that shot. And there's certain scenes, like even the fantasy sequence about her dad, that's really dark and shot in like a really interesting way. Then there's other times where like things are moving, there's an action sequence, and they sort of like are breaking, I think they break the 180 rule a bunch. I think they break like cinematography rules. And while I was watching, I was like, I sort of like that the camera's moving all over the place, but this is just like visually a fucking mess. Like, it is just such a mess of a movie. This is literally one of the biggest messes in terms of use of camera in any movie I've seen in a long time, specifically an animated movie. The fact that it doesn't have a director kind of brings up that while you're watching it, there's things like when they go through all the rides, there's like certain things you know from like when her mom's showing her, playing with her and showing her the various like map of Wonderland and things like that. But then when you get to Wonderland, there's like no kind of crossover. Like, it doesn't feel like you're like, oh, like some of it's like, oh, this is the 0G area. Like, that made a lot of sense to me. Like, I was like, oh, I remember this from that. But then there's other parts I'm like, is that, I remember sort of the Welcome Bear, but I don't remember this part, and it seemed very jumbled. It honestly felt a lot of times like there was a scene that was maybe cut out or not animated or something. Like, I'm not sure exactly what happened to this story, because it does feel like maybe there's like 20 minutes or 15 minutes this film needed just to like sort of set things up a little better. And then the fact that the camera's moving all over the place, I never got a visual sense to it. I was always kind of on edge, not in like a good way, in more of a like, wait, what am I supposed to be looking at? The lighting in this film, particularly when they're in Wonder Park, had like a Days of Heaven thing. Like, clearly this guy, whoever worked on this, likes Terrence Malick a lot, but like, I think one of the things about Terrence Malick is like, he sort of gets what he's doing with it, even though it feels like he's a mess. Particularly in like something like Days of Heaven, there was a distinct perspective, and I would say like this film sort of does, but also like definitely does not have a perspective a lot of the time. It has like no perspective. It's like bopping all around. Even so, you're not sure, like, is the death sadness cloud, is that like her or is that her mom? And part of me thought it was her mom, because like honestly, like, she didn't really come up with that many ideas. Like, when we're talking about creativity and imagination, felt like her mom was like really creative, and then like the daughter was like, yeah, I'll do that thing you said, except for like the loop-de-loop thing that she came up with her friends, which, to be honest, I sort of thought her mom came up with. It's such a like throwing blocks on the floor kind of a movie. You kind of can see a structure in it a lot of the time. So there's so many films I've seen that are directed by people who are, you know, credited and stuff, that are messes on the scale or worse than this. But I think because this is such a kind of a mess, and there's things clearly left out or things that they didn't write or something, you know, there's just like things that should have been a clear screenwriting perspective could have been done with it, that could have really done more with this movie and made it more clear. Because that you want to blame like what happened to them not putting a director in its stead, but animated movies are different from what happened on like Bohemian Rhapsody or something. But it does feel like they should have had someone like go over it more. And then I really question, like, so you're gonna make a show out of this? This feels kind of like a real closed thing. This feels like, this is it, guys, that's it, Wonder Park, we're done. She saved her imagination, which also feels weird because like she's getting older and she's probably not gonna want to do this stuff anymore. I don't think the narrative should be that Dylan Brown shouldn't have been fired, because he should if he's doing things like that, and clearly he could get away with that at Pixar. I'm just saying, that's a part of this that's a little weird. Nickelodeon movies or Paramount Animation as a studio should come together to kind of fix this film, and this felt like a studio. There's certain studios like Warner Brothers or Disney or something that as a studio has enough resources to come together and make a movie work, even if that director necessarily can't. And this doesn't feel like a studio that can do that. You know, at a certain point when like you definitely fired Dylan Brown, that's fine, that's responsible, that's what you should have done, but you as a studio should come together and make this over $100 million movie, which seems to be a ridiculous investment in terms of a franchise like this. I mean, it's like, I'm happy that you did something like that. I think that's really cool, but at the same time, I'm like, that is like financially almost incredibly irresponsible. But Winter Park, I think, is an interesting, odd animated film. It's the kind of film that you're like, oh, remember that thing and stuff like that? That was weird. But it's not one that anyone's, I think, going to fall in love that much with, just because of all the, like, why does the monkey have a pen and he's making things? They're sort of self-aware of it. Like, all those things are sort of strange and not really explained, and they're trying to do the Inside Out thing but not using the metaphor correctly. Like Inside Out, it's always aware that like joy and sadness are like going on this adventure, and you understand what's going on with her and how that makes sense and everything like that. But this is like, wait, so we're like, the question I had of like, are we dealing with like the mom is dying and is sad and that's why it's getting swallowed up, or is it the girl who's sad? And like that got confusing, and it's just like, it seemed to want to do what a lot of other movies did, but it didn't seem to understand why those other movies did them. And I think that's like sort of the issue here. It did do things in a different way. It was shot in a different way. It was made in a sort of different, stranger way, and I sort of like that. Particularly like, I think when it's cutting around, because this movie cuts a lot. When it cuts around at the beginning, I thought that was like really, really cool at the beginning with the mom and stuff. I thought that sequence was very well done. It's never as good as that. It just never understood why, and never gave a reason, and never like explained and really thought out their metaphors in this film. It just kind of did them and just hoped it would all work. And they're kind of just like, felt like they're just pushing this through and getting what sort of feels like a movie, but this isn't like a complete film. It's just kind of like a very messy, strange movie that they put too much money in. I kind of appreciate it for its messy strangeness, and I think definitely you can. I don't think it's like the worst thing ever. I think it's decently entertaining, but it is, as a narrative and as a complete movie, it's just such a blah, like, you know, but it's kind of like an interesting blah. I'm like, oh look, there's corn in your throw up. Like, that's kind of what Wonder Park basically is. So if you have seen Wonder Park and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.